prices are soaring. Every day on gasoline.
We're looking for answers. We're pissed off, lost, seeking truth and unbiased information. We want to make our country safe again. We are passionately holding on to our freedom. We want to defend our nation. Here is the antidote to powerlessness. Constructive, not destructive. Welcome to Mad as Hell University.
Welcome to Mad as Hell University, where we give you constructive tools instead of destructive fears. I'm your host, Raj Doraisamy. I came to the United States in 1986. I left 3 countries to get here. What I saw in Ethiopia, Zambia, and Zimbabwe is where the United States is heading today. I don't want that. You don't want that. We want to save our country. If you do not face your anger with wisdom, you will not find the strategy to overcome the problem. And that is what we do at Mad as Hell University. This week, it's Pastor Appreciation Week, and we're giving you an action-packed lesson in boldness and fearlessness. But first, a word from our sponsors. Welcome back, Defenders. Today, we're talking about boldness and fearlessness. That's right, boldness and fearlessness. I bet you haven't heard many conversations on those topics lately. These are critical topics for our world today because there's so much fear and hopelessness. As pastors, your job is to deliver the good news. And that is not just that Jesus is coming back to save us from the gloom, doom, and boom. Jesus already did the saving. We need to follow up with bold action steps and fearless preparedness. And what's the best way to conquer fear? Prepare to face it. With us today is Sig Swanstrom, author of Gods, Guns, and Guts of Firearm Defense, the Bible View, and a 4-part preparedness manual, Prepared, Ready to Roll. Sig, welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be with you.
You are doing things that really I haven't heard a lot of pastors talk about. You're very bold. I admire your courage. You feel that this is something that's very important today. And you recently were at a conference. Tell us a little bit about what you heard at that conference, Sig.
A few weeks ago, I attended a conference put on by the Faith-Based Security Network. And I'll put in a little plug for them here, Faith-Based Security Network. I don't remember if it's .org or .com, but they are really the premier organization in the U.S. that's dealing with church and church property security and protection for congregations. And we have a program through Texas Republic Farms Academy that provides security surveys for churches and some basic training for safety teams. And we tend to call them safety teams, by the way, and not just security teams, because we provide and believe that these people should be medically trained as well as trained in different security protocols. So, we're involved in that, but the Faith-Based Security Network is kind of an umbrella organization. And the reason I mention them is in this latest conference that I went to, one of the speakers was the pastor from Sutherland Springs. And if you probably don't remember that mass shooting because there's been so many of them, but Sutherland Springs is a small rural community south of San Antonio. I don't know, probably an hour south of San Antonio, completely rural. And the pastor is very involved with the Boy Scouts, or I guess Scouts now. And he was attending a training seminar out of state. And somebody asked him about church security while he was at this seminar. And this was on a Saturday afternoon. And he said, well, frankly, we're not worried about it because we live in a rural area. Nothing ever happens where we live. And so we really haven't done that much to prepare because we just don't think it's a problem. And it was the very next day that a mass shooting occurred at his church. That was the one where the assailant came with an AR-15 and started shooting through the door of the church. And immediately, it turned out to be a woman giving an announcement was behind the pulpit. She was killed. And then he walked around the church shooting through the walls. And basically everybody, almost everybody in the church was wounded. And so it was, and many died. And it was, one of those sad cases, but it's one of those sad cases people say, well, it's not going to happen to me. Well, that's one of the things I appreciate about the faith-based security network is they're keeping statistics on actual shootings and acts of violence that are occurring on church properties. And the media is not reporting these, but they are, keeping track. And there's just the uptick in these attacks in the last few years is just monumental. So we can't think that this is just something that's a rare occasion. It is increasing and we need to be ready for it. And so churches, like here in Texas, the joke is that we have to tell the congregation to let the security team handle it because, half the congregation is armed and you don't want everybody jumping up and, taking shots. But the attack inside a church has special, or a theater or any place where there's lots of people, has special considerations in the response because the opportunity to accidentally injure an innocent bystander is so great. And so that's why the added training, it's a very specialty training that's different than what someone would get in, for example, in one of my classes that is handgun self-defense, because there's so much more to the issue if you're dealing, with lots of innocent bystanders.
Sig, you're a pastor yourself. Tell us a little bit about your church and some of the things that you're doing in your church to help your congregation feel safe, feel secure in these uncertain times.
In our church, I attend a small church, about 120 people, and our safety team, they're not the official greeters, but they are out meeting people and saying hi and making people feel welcome. And in the presence in the congregation, it doesn't come across like an armed camp or something, but it lets the congregation relax and worship freely because they know somebody's got their back. And so we have a team of people that are on duty every Sunday and every church event to make sure that, the congregation is safe and also safe from medical emergencies. So our people are trained in stop the bleed and CPR, and we have, various other medical supplies on hand as well. So it's a more holistic approach to safety than just, an active shooter.
Sig, what are some of the things that people can do, leaders especially, to help the people that they're leading not only be safe and secure, but also feel safe and secure in terms of community preparedness?
There's two aspects of being ready. You have to be prepared, and then you have to be ready. As we run these scenarios, we become prepared to act. So we're prepared, and when the time comes, we are ready to roll. The odds of us encountering exactly the same circumstance that we contemplated is pretty small. But if we ran different scenarios in our mind, we end up, the mind is incredible in the ability to pull these things together. And when it's time and you're ready to roll, you're much better equipped to actually make good, sound decisions because you've contemplated things in advance, and that was part of your preparation. So we can be prepared by carrying pepper spray or carrying a concealed gun. You know, that's all good, but we also need to be mentally prepared so we're ready to act at the time when it happens. And, you know, some things happen in just seconds, and you have, you know, less than a second to respond. And, you know, other things you can be, you know, more deliberate, you know, in seeking cover, and then, you know, trying to figure out what's the best course of action. But we have to be ready for both. We have to be ready for instantaneous action, and we have to be ready if we can contemplate, you know, developing a plan. You know, that's of course the better choice if we have that option. So being prepared and then being ready to roll. It's two pieces of the same puzzle. And if we're prepared, but we're not ready to roll, then ultimately we're of no use. And if we're ready to roll, but we're not prepared, then we tend to make bad decisions. So that's my point, is the preparation involves, you know, pre-planning, and it may be scenarios, it may be just having the equipment and gear, you know, maybe having a go bag in your car so that if something happens and, you know, you have to hoof it out on foot, you're able to do that. So that 36 Ready website has a lot of information about things like that as well. But very often, you know, I've seen people in emergencies that just weren't ready, and they respond out of crisis instead of, you know, having any thought applied to the situation. So anyway, the Prepared Ready to Roll book 1 I wrote is why it's so important to be prepared. And I actually wrote that for spouses, because very often, in fact, it's usually women that are more attuned to being prepared, and while their husband is busy watching football or something and not thinking about these things. So anyway, that first book in the series was written to help if you have family members or a spouse that aren't getting it. It's something to read and go over together and talk about. And then the book 2 and 3 is the actual practical sides of it. And then of course this book 4, when it comes out, will be on building your own community.
Sig, thank you very much for being our guest. Thank you for sharing with us what you're doing to help communities feel safe and be safe. Action steps and a mission statement when we come back. Welcome back, Defenders. It's time for action steps. Sig, a preparedness expert, is going to be actually doing the action steps for us on this episode.
First, I think is to conclude what it is you're preparing for. You know, are you preparing for the zombie apocalypse, or are you preparing to, you know, to try to avoid being a victim of a crime? You know, what is it you're preparing for? Are you preparing for civil unrest? I mean, there's lots of different pieces to this. One of the wonderful blessings is that being prepared generally prepares you for a lot of different things. So the issue of psychologically being prepared and physically being prepared is important. But one thing I haven't dealt with much in this conversation is also being socially prepared. In other words, having a group of friends, family, whatever you know, your close group is, to be able to bat ideas off of and think about things together and make various preparations together. And whether you're taking a firearms class or whether you're preparing a go bag, it's a whole lot more fun to do it with somebody than to just try to do it on your own. So that, I would say those are the first 2 points. One, actually figuring out what you're preparing for, and then preparing for it. And then the other thing is realizing you don't have to do it alone. At least for most people, they don't. And then the third one is to prepare holistically. I so often see people, of course, I'm in the firearm training business. And so I see people who have lots of guns, lots of ammunition, but they don't have much in the way of food supply. They don't have ability to purify water. They don't have the other aspects of preparedness. They aren't prepared with good medical kits. It's not a matter of a first aid kit. What if you can't get to a doctor? What if it's just up to you to handle that emergency? And it's not a matter of just bundling them off into an ambulance and sending them to a hospital. What if you have to deal with it? Do you have you have a medical kit and enough orientation to that to be able to handle that yourself? So the holistic side of it, and I don't mean holistic like holistic medicine, I mean holistic as in the whole picture. There's so many different elements to being prepared, and long-term food supply, short-term food supply, the go bag to be able to grab and go. These are all different aspects of preparedness. And that the second book, actually book 2 and 3 in my series, this one, the background here that I'm using came off the cover of this book. I enjoy, or I appreciate this image because you can hardly see, but on my right shoulder is a house, and the rest of the image is all this lightning happening. The lightning has not reached the house yet, but it's going to. And that's the way we need to live our life, not in fear, but rather in preparation and being ready. And so this image that I used on the cover of this book really kind of is an example of this. There's storm clouds all around us, whether it's political, whether it's social, whether it's Antifa or BLM or teaching critical theory in our schools. Politicians that aren't standing up and doing their job, courts that aren't doing their job, police officers that have been made neutered in their ability to do their job because their local government won't let them do their job. Or, like in California, Los Angeles, San Francisco areas that have prosecutors who aren't doing their job. We have storm clouds all around us. And it is a big mistake to think that the future is going to look like today. We can expect it to be very different. And so we have to be prepared, ready to roll, but we also have to be resilient. And so that would be my last item in your list, is being resilient and adaptable. And because we don't know what we're going to encounter in the future. So we have to grow a spine and being willing to stand up as Jesus warriors, as in that verse I read in Isaiah 53:12. But, and we have to realize we're going to be considered rebels. And we want to do that if we're Jesus rebels, but we don't want to just be rebels for the sake of being rebels. So we don't want to be just rabble rousers. We want to be people who are effectively and shrewdly making a difference in our society. But while we work to make society better and our country better and save our states and local governments, we need to also prepare individually and as families and as groups of friends for uncertain days ahead so that we have each other's back.
I want to add a couple of thoughts for your consideration. We talked about boldness. In Latin, A merry man was a companion or a follower of a knight. Like Robin Hood, he was a sidekick, a co-hero on a quest. The intent of Mass was to gather together right before you go on a mission. So what that really means is every time you see Merry Christmas, you're sending that person on a mission, a co-bearer with Christ, a mission of peace, a mission to spread the word, to spread the light, a mission to be the salt of the earth. Every time you say Merry Christmas. In other words, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to go into all the world with Christ as your traveling companion, or you, more rather, as his traveling companion, on a bold quest to rescue and redeem. The gospel should be pushing back against darkness with light, with goodness, with authenticity, because light and love are powerful. So it's a message of the Messiah to rescue, redeem, heal, and bring the life and message of Christ in your actions to the world around you. Thank you for watching this episode. Please connect with us in our community on cloudhub.com. Go to cloudhub.com and look for Mad as Hell University. We want to hear your comments. If you're watching this on Rumble, you can put your comments here below and we will respond to those. But importantly, where we're really focusing and building our community is on cloudhub.com on the Mad as Hell University group and channel. Thank you for watching today, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks for your support of this platform. Use the code BTV at checkout for additional savings. Brighteonstore.com.
Grace to you and peace from God our Father and from the Lord Jesus Christ. My name is Dr. John Diamond. This is the show America Unhinged, which is fervently patriotic and unapologetically Christian. You can find me at AmericaUnhingedRadio.com. Where you can find all my books. Please download the free ebook that is there on how to save America with imprecatory prayer. Our schedule today was I was intending to have Richard Proctor on from the Provost Institute in segment 1, and then segment 2 was going to be the Mad as Hell University spot that you saw. But my camera was not cooperating, so we just decided to run segment 1 first. So we did that. We ran Mad as Hell University on segment 1, and we are coming back with segment 2, and we are going to have Richard Proctor from the Provost Institute with us. He's going to be talking about debt. I will have him this Thursday and next Thursday. As we spoke off camera while that was running, the topic was going to be personal debt and national debt, and we realized that this topic was so big that we would never cover it in its entirety, really, in one 22-minute segment. So we're going to talk about personal debt this week, and then come back next Thursday as we talk about national debt. And we'll go clear back to the beginning with Hamilton and the national banks and everything else. So let me start off here with a scripture verse that talks to us about debt. Proverbs 22:7. And it reads this: the rich rules over the poor, and the borrower is the servant to the lender. Now, if you understand the original Hebrew Republic as God created it, you know that people were allowed to borrow from one another, but they had a jubilee. A jubilee was where everything was reset and everything went back to normal. There was not this perpetual debt. There were no monopolies. People were not buying up big properties of land until they owned everything and enslaved everybody. Everything went back to the people every 50 years. So again, us disregarding God's eternal rules for how to run a nation and a society just as enslaved us. And Richard, I'd like to welcome you back to America Unhinged this morning.
Like to be here.
Awesome, brother. Yeah, no, and let's talk about personal debt this morning. And there's a little bit of a kind of gray light because we talked about before the show. I was like, okay, what about a house? What about a car? I mean, I can't afford it. I can't afford $120,000. And you said, well, those are the only two that would probably be justified, but everything else is just really a waste of time, isn't it?
Well, I wouldn't say a waste of time because people do need to go on vacations and people do need to do things, but you don't go in debt for fun. You don't go in debt just to have fun. You should not be. You're going to use a credit card. I understand that. Don't use it so much. Here's some industry information. I'm just going to mention this. The national debt is 29 trillion today. The personal debt is 21 trillion today. And nobody talks about the personal debt. We just keep borrowing and borrowing and borrowing and borrowing. And then we're caught with interest. And that they want us to use credit cards because they know that people cannot pay the credit cards off. So since they can't do it, they are going to get 20, 25, 26, 27%. And they don't bat an eye. They don't bat an eye about that. It's an absolute horror. Let's just talk a little bit about school, about the school debt. I mean, a lot of people are getting school debt. Okay, I went to school. I probably spent about $1,000 a year at Brigham Young University. That's all I spent. My dad financed it out of his paycheck. Wasn't a problem. My son, he went to a college nearby. He lived here at home, and I paid for him out of my pocket. But if he had gone to Yale University, he'd be on the hook for his life. The key is, why did that happen? Why are all the banks, all the universities clear up there when they used to be down where you could afford it? And they operated too, by the way, on the numbers that we could afford. This is what happened. As we were going along, the government became more and more interested in getting control of the people. The government wanted control. Economics is a major way to get control. You remember you just read in Proverbs that the lender is shall we say the borrower is the servant of the lender? Okay, think about that for a moment. What does servant mean? In another view, it means slave.
Correct.
Okay, so here we have a government saying to the schools, tell you what you do. You just set up a borrowing office in your school, and you have a borrowing table at your admissions time, and you set that up, and we will back all of the money so you don't have to be on the hook. And they liked that. So they didn't have to be on the hook. So rather than try to skimp or something, they just raised prices. And they did it slowly, incrementally, to where now there are schools that we 100, 120, 150,000 a year. And that's stupid, because when you graduate, you can't make enough to pay the interest on that and your family and all that kind of stuff. And then they also did one other thing with school debt. When they were doing this, they took out the ability of anyone to have a bankruptcy on it. So it doesn't matter to the government whether you eat or not, or whether you're destroyed or not. You're going to pay us every nickel, or rather you're going to pay every nickel back on that debt. And the schools profited and took no risk. And the government got you hung up. I mean, you caught hook, line, and sinker because you got debt. Because, oh, it's fun to go to school. I can go to school. I don't have to borrow money. I don't have to work. I don't have to get a job. I can just, I'll just do it. Well, in the days of yore, when I went to school, many had jobs, part-time, so they could support their school. And they could support their school time on a part-time job. And that can't be done today. You can't do that on a full-time job. I mean,
Yeah,
and then when you
exactly.
graduate, what's your
Exactly.
opportunity when you graduate? This is terrible. Go ahead, John. I get all excited about these things.
Well, that's why we have you on, because you've got so many years of knowledge in this, and this is where your heart and your passion is. I'm working with a young man here locally that was going to go to a Christian university, and I think he said he's going to end up like at $150,000 in debt. And he actually called the administrators and the counselors and everybody else and says, you know, how can we justify this? This is supposed to be a Christian institution, and you are violating basically every principle that God says about debt and everything else. And the whole thing's a racket. I mean, I know the whole thing's a racket, top to bottom. Even the Christian schools are a racket. The education's a racket. It's all a money-making institution. That's all it is. If they wanted to educate and they wanted to do it at a very, very low price, they could do it for pennies. But they don't want to do it. There's no incentive because it's not what they want to do. They just want to have all these big buildings, and now we're paying football coaches, $10 million a year to run a football game. Why am I going to Alabama or Ohio State or any of these, and giving you guys $50,000 a year for you to pay a football coach? We need to decentralize all of this stuff. Talk to us a little bit there about the debt with the schools, because we were talking about that before the show.
Let's wander back to one more thing. We have debt on the elementary schools, the K through 12. We have debt on that. How do we get debt on that? It's through property tax. They steal money from us. We're paying debt. Why do you think schools can afford administrators of $100,000 a year?
Exactly.
I mean, the teachers make a little bit. They don't make. They do okay. They can live on it. But the administrators are up in $100,000 a year and more. How? Because your property tax is paying for that, and they're just fat, dumb, and happy to do exactly what the federal government wants, and they're slaves to the federal government, and we are now slaves to them because of the property tax. It's the worst tax we have, property tax.
It is. And I mean, really, that is the root of communism, is because they say, oh, everybody needs to be equal. But you know what? The administrators, you go to communist China or Russia, you've got these people, they're sitting pretty, right? Because they administer where all the funds go. I saw Fauci getting interviewed by Ted Cruz yesterday in a video somebody sent me, and he was like, and I didn't know this, he said he makes $425,000 a year to run this NIH or whatever. How in the world are we paying these idiots to enslave us? We need to decentralize from everything. Public education, secondary education, whether it's the colleges. What you're doing with economics is just absolutely wonderful. What I'm starting to do with a Bible college is absolutely wonderful. It'll be so low cost that it's not even funny. We need to start worrying about people and not about money, because the love of it is the root of all evil.
Yes, but money itself isn't. It's the people behind it.
Correct.
I mean, there are people, billionaires, who are trying to make more money on their deathbed.
Yes.
What? More money on your deathbed? Now, I want to point something out about this system, just for interest. First, I must preface this by saying that the 16th Amendment is completely unconstitutional. It is not legal, okay? It is not legal by the Constitution itself. You can't have it, but we do. Why? What did they do? They started out with real low, and we're only going to attack in 1913 really was in 1914, because that's when it started. That real low on people with lots of money and lots of income, and nothing on the people up to, it was 0 up to 20,000, nothing. Well, now 20,000 is a big bite. Not very many people in 1914 were making 20,000 a year. What? Now this was set up by the very people that are profiting from it. So now what? How could they profit? Because there were loopholes established that they could put their money in and not pay taxes on it. So bottom line, the taxes all went down to the middle class and the poor people, because those people had accountants and they had advisors, and they put their money where they weren't taxed. And that's a problem right there. And they set it up like that so that the burden didn't go on them, even though they sold it that it was going to. The burden didn't go on them. It went on the people. Look where it is today. Did you know in 1950 there was a 94% percentile on the income tax? 94%. There was one margin at the top, 94%. And that went in almost every year all the way through the 50s. A 94% margin. What that means is you get up to be a a millionaire, you're making a lot of money, and so they're going to take 94% of the next step. Well, think about it for a minute. These guys that started these businesses, they're wealthy because they could start a business. They knew that if they lost money, the government would shoot them in the foot. If they made money, the government would collect it all. So that's the plan. And you just don't believe this, but people don't understand that if you have a debt or a loss in a business, you can take $3,000 a year off of it. It takes 30 years about to get off that debt. But the government makes, if you make a profit in that business, then the government begins to collect all of the money the very first year. All of it. You're taxed on all of it that calendar year. And you're taxed at the ratios. They call it a progressive tax. It's not a progressive tax. It's a, shall we say, a regressive. The difference? Progressive means steps at a time. Regressive means it's all the same. Sales tax is a regressive tax. Bad word. Sales tax is a good tax, if there is one. But I could go on and on about this. This and banking are horrible. But the education system, we are being fleeced. Worse than ever. You read that scripture. Who is in charge of our country and who are the slaves? The banks are in charge of the country and we are the slaves. And I don't mean just the bank, your branch bank in your city. That's right. The branch bank in your city is doing stuff and it's loaning money, but they're doing it under the control of the central bank, not the central bank of their organization. Like some of these banks, they'll have a big headquarters in San Antonio or someplace. That's what they have to go to ask for anything. Those people then go up to the Federal Reserve and ask, what can we do? And the Federal Reserve gets its instructions from the international banking establishment. And you guys know somebody in that. One of them's called Bill Gates. Another one's called George Soros. They're the people in that group, okay? And they're not really wealthy. You don't ever know the names of the guys who are wealthy. My wife said the other day, you think maybe there are people in this world making $1 trillion a year? Yes, there are. They're making $1 trillion a year, and they're doing it off our back and our debt.
Yep.
That's how they're doing it. We're paying debt. They're collecting it for their own self to buy yachts. We're paying for their yachts through the ridiculous loans, the debt we've got.
That's crazy. That's absolutely crazy. And we talked about before the show, I mean, it used to be back in the day that if I wanted a TV or if I wanted something that was high value, hey, I'm saving for this or I'm saving for, you don't ever hear anybody say I'm saving for anything. We just put it on a credit card, pay 25% interest, and then we really don't even ever pay it off. We just keep paying the same payment every month. And the TV that was, $800 is now $25,000 because you paid interest on it.
Yeah, if it goes down a little bit, we take the card and use it again. So it always stays high. Mm-hmm. And they got us roped into over 25% interest. Folks, that's usury. That was against the law. That's what the numbers racket was in New York City in the 30s.
Yep. We talked about this. It's all a racket. It's all a cartel, but because the government's doing it, I mean, it's no different than the mafia doing it. Only now it's just regulated and subsidized by the government and the government officials. That's what I've said continually on this show. I mean, everybody up there is a criminal. Every last one of them is a criminal. What they're doing, just because they legalize what they would throw us in jail for, does not make it right. But the problem is we don't have anybody other than God, and that's what my appeal to heaven thing is about. We don't have anybody but God that can stop these people because we can't do it from the bottom up unless we abandon the entire system, the education system, the public schools, all of it. You were talking about the banking. We'll talk about that next week we have to create almost a parallel economy that's based on God's laws and God's principles and not the world's.
Yes. By the way, an interesting thing about this subject you're bringing up is that blast. You talked too long. I lost the thought. I can't get it back. I'm sorry. Can't get it back.
No, that's all right.
I'll get it back.
Yeah, and like I said, we was talking about just the whole racket, the entire rackets. They do things that if you do it, they throw you in.
I got it.
Go ahead.
I got it. If you, John, if you started an operation, a business, now a real business now, You started a real business where you sold something to somebody who sold it to somebody else, and they sold it, and then you got benefit from the fourth person. And you'd get a lot of money for it. The first person gets a lot of money. The second person gets a lot of money. The third person gets a lot of fourth. But the bottom guys just keep paying in, paying in. That's called a Ponzi scheme. That's the worst thing there is. What's the biggest Ponzi scheme in the United States? Social Security.
Oh boy.
Social Security, a government-financed institution, is a Ponzi scheme. They started out with a few people paying a little bit in, slowly but surely, more and more people got on it. Now, the Ponzi scheme, they could not pay Social Security without your paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. People are retiring, and they're not paid into Social Security. And that's the problem. Folks, it's a Ponzi scheme where we the workers, are working so somebody else can live high. That's what a Ponzi scheme is. It's a Ponzi scheme, guys. Remember the numbers racket in New York City in the past? Numbers racket. Today they call it the lottery, and the government does it. They say they're going to do it to support the schools. I was in Ohio when that was a big deal. We're going to support the schools out of the lottery. They didn't. Schools never got anything. We still got increases in the property tax. And where did the lottery money go? To the lottery guys who did it. That's where it went.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that's one thing that absolutely needs to go away is property tax. I mean, you got people that work their entire life, they buy a house, they retire, and now they got to sell it because they can't even afford the property tax because Social Security doesn't even pay for that. So property tax needs to go away altogether.
Absolutely. That's the worst tax we have.
It is absolutely the worst tax that we have, and that's why I'm working here in Pennsylvania to try to do what we can do to end this property tax, because it's absolutely just raping people, and especially destroying our seniors and our parents and grandparents, and
that's what it's doing.
And then if you can't pay your property tax, they come in and take your property. They steal from you, violation of the 10th commandment. Or the 10 commandments. They steal from you and sell your property, and they don't even give you the money for it.
Yes, that's right. Now let me explain something here. This is important, and this very, very thing. They're stealing from us. We gave them permission. Property tax didn't exist in the olden days. It wasn't there. Mm-hmm. You had a rent, you didn't pay property tax. But the government saw a way to raise money. They also saw a way to get you enslaved to them.
Correct.
So that's what property tax is. It's another way to enslave you in debt. And you're right. Who owns the property? The people who can sell your property own the property. So if you don't pay your property tax, the sheriff comes in, confiscates it, and the bank sells it. So the bank, the county, own your house. You don't. You think you've paid for it. You paid $200,000 for your home. You think you own it. No, you don't. No, you don't. Because they could come in and take it away from you tomorrow and raise the property tax so you couldn't pay it. I mean, that's what we've got. We've got people that are scheming and stealing from us every minute. This is not a valid system. Our whole system is breaking apart.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, is there, and you're an economics, major, is there anything else in this world that we buy that we have to keep paying tax? I buy a car, I pay sales tax. That's fine. I'm okay with the sales tax, but I don't keep paying tax on my car every year. It seems like other than driver's license and registration and
there you
things
go.
of that.
And you do also have to license it. I don't mean license, register it. To register, you got to pay the fee to register.
That's illegal.
So you got to pay it every day.
Yeah. And they're like, well, where are we going to get the money from? Quit spending. That's where you get the money from.
Yes. That $21 trillion that I mentioned at the beginning, that's money we have all signed on the dotted line that we will pay back. We owe that. Now we talk about the federal debt, huge, and we can't ever pay that back, we say. Now we have a personal debt that's just as high, and they say we can pay that back. Yeah, that's the way it works. We can pay that back. If we would, just don't borrow money. Pay your debts and don't borrow money. Now you got to borrow money, like you mentioned earlier. There are some things that are big ticket items that if you do without, if you can't really do without. And that's a home to live in and a car to get around. But when you buy your car, you don't go get a Cadillac or a luxury car, a Rolls Royce. You get what you can afford. Okay? That's what you do. When you buy a house, the realtor is going to take you the one that's the most expensive in the lot because he makes more money. You got to stay within your budget. You figure it out and stay within it. Don't let it get away from you. Then pay regular. Actually, pay every 2 weeks. Even though they only require to pay once a month, make a half payment, make another payment every month, or make a half payment every month. Just do that. Make one half payment every month, and it all goes to principal, and your debt will decrease really fast. Very important. You've got to get out of debt. You've got to. That's the most important thing.
Yeah,
And
it absolutely is. And I'm glad we had that discussion here today. Tell the people if they want to take your courses on economics, we got about 50 seconds left, where to find you.
provisinstitute.com. Provis, Provis, institute.com. There you'll find it. We do doctorate, we do bachelor's, we do master's. $350 a year is the total cost for tuition, total. One registration, $99 for life, okay? And the bachelor's is $350 a year. Everybody can afford that. That's where your bachelor's is. Master's $475, doctor's $600. You
That's
can
awesome.
afford this.
That's great, Richard. I appreciate you being on the show again this week, and we're going to have you back talking about national debt next week.
Yes.
All right. God bless. All right, guys, I'm heading to Delaware tomorrow, so I will have Mike Spalding filling in for me, and I will see you Monday. God bless.